Hello, everybody, and welcome to the D&D podcast. Today, I have a story about the time my players threw the BBG into the sun by accident. Now, this is kind of a weird story, so let me give you a little bit of context. At this point in time, there were only 3 members of the party. There was a warlock, a monk, and a homebrew class called a blade mage, I believe. It has been a while. A blade mage is essentially a combination between the fighter and the paladin class, only with the artificer's ability to imbue magical spells into a sword. The 3 of them were on a journey to find 2 parts of a magical item that, when put together, would form a very powerful gauntlet. Now, this gauntlet would be able to shoot a very powerful beam and destroy a man named Silverwood. Now, Silverwood was the final boss, obviously, and he just showed up one day and was destroying the entire continent that they were on. And obviously, the group of heroes were hired to find this gauntlet to stop him. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but just to generalize and sum up, that's the gist of it. And they already had the first part of this gauntlet. Now, they knew where the second location was, and they spent about 2 sessions trying to get to it. When they arrived, they were a little confused at first, because although they went to an Arctic area to find this second piece, as they got closer to this cave, it was getting warmer and warmer. They went into the cave, and when they reached the end, they found a pool of lava with many different small-like platforms that they could jump across to get to the center. There were also some narrow pathways that were made of some not fully submerged ground. In the center of the cave, though, there was a massive pyre of gold, copper, bronze, several magical items and weapons, but the thing that caught their attention the most was on top of it, the second piece of the gauntlet. Now they just had to reach it. As they succeeded on their dex checks to get across to the gauntlet, they found something rather disturbing when they were about halfway there. A man had appeared out of nowhere just above the gauntlet, and they all recognized him as Silverwood. Now, one thing I should probably mention about Silverwood, just for fun's sake, is he always had pink eyes. And that was a long-running joke, but at some point, it just became his defining characteristic. So whenever I said a character had pink eyes, they were instantly in fear of that character, and also enraged at me for actually putting them in the game. So, as they see Silverwood appear above the second piece of the gauntlet, they are a little bit afraid of him, because the only other time they saw him, he slaughtered a bunch of people that could easily have killed them. Now, Silverwood slowly descended, as he usually levitated, and picked up the gauntlet. Well, the second piece. He looked at them all, and he congratulated them for making it this far, but then began to insult them of how they would never actually be able to defeat him, and that they were pretty much nothing compared to him. Silverwood was the most powerful character I have ever created to this day. He was very broken, very overpowered, and the reason I made him that way was because initially it was going to be a high-level campaign for 12 people. It didn't exactly go through that way, and that's a story for another day. But the gist is, He was very broken and very overpowered. So, when the party saw him again, they weren't exactly happy to see him. I wasn't exactly sure what they were going to do, but I did not expect them to actually attack him. The monk charged at him and told me he wanted to use Fury of Blows. We rolled initiative, and the battle begun. The other two members joined the monk, and initially there was absolutely no contest. Silverwood was throwing them around, casting high-powered spells, wasn't taking any damage, even manipulating the lava to come up and grab the players, causing massive amount of fire damage. Eventually, though, the Blade Mage told me he wants to try to grapple Silverwood. I tell him okay. Silverwood had a high strength modifier. I didn't think he would succeed. Though Silverwood rolled a nat 1, and the Blade Mage rolled a nat 20. I was almost in disbelief, but I say, okay, you have grappled Silverwood. He described it as if he wanted to go from behind him and just hold his arms behind his back, kind of grapple. I tell him, okay, you do that. He is restrained. And then it is the Warlock's turn. Now, the Warlock has taken the greatest beating so far, since he was actually thrown directly into the lava, and when he came out, he only had about 4 or 5 hit points left. Now, what he said was the Warlock realized that they were not going to win this fight, and the best thing that they could do would just be to get Silverwood out of this cave. To do that, he takes out a magical item I gave them when they found the first part of the gauntlet. It's called the Well of Many Worlds. If you're unfamiliar with the Well of Many Worlds, basically it's a black handkerchief, and when you open it up, it's probably big enough to fit a medium-sized creature on top of. And what you do is the DM rolls a D100, and there are about 100, there are about 50 different places that it can open up to. Most of them are references to other locations in D&D lore, but I was unfamiliar with a lot of them at the time, so I changed a few of them. It was more of a homebrew Well of Many Worlds. But if you rolled a 1, a 2, or a 3, it would open a portal to a place called Dark Sun. I later learned that Dark Sun is actually a place from either 4th or 3rd edition. I'm not completely sure on that, but it is a location, and at the time I had never heard of it, and I took it pretty literally. I thought it was opening a portal to an actual black sun, like send him to space and get burned alive, sun. So naturally, when the Warlock charges at the restrained Silverwood, saying he wants to open the Well of Many Worlds, I make him make a dex check to actually maneuver him into this portal. When he succeeds the dex check, I roll for where they send him, and naturally, I roll a 2. So they threw the BBG into a sun, and then they closed the portal behind him. I was in shock because this was actually the halfway point of the campaign, and I'm thinking that they just killed my final boss. So I have to actually think, how much damage would the sun do? As ridiculous as that sounds, I actually tried to do some calculations, and since I was using 5e mechanics, I decide on about 250 d6 per turn. An outrageous number for an outrageous event. I had to end up using a bot to roll all 250 die because there was no way I was actually going to roll 250 die just to see how much damage this did. It did something about 877 points of damage, somewhere around that. And keep in mind that I made Silverwood the most powerful I could possibly think. And he actually survived the initial round. I then tell my players, because at the time, metagaming, it was more of a casual game and we didn't mind so much metagaming. So at least for this campaign, others I definitely have. But for this session and this campaign, we didn't really mind it that much. It was all a bunch of friends. And anyway, I let them know that he actually survived this. But because of such a massive amount of damage done to him, that had to have disoriented him to some extent. So I picked up a d20 and I tell them, I'm going to roll this die. If I roll a 1 through 10, he is not going to even realize, it's not going to even occur to him to use the spell Plane Shift, which he had ready and available. If I roll an 11 through 20, he's going to have enough sense, even though he took so much damage. But if he rolls an 11 through 20, he will be able to have enough sense to use the spell Plane Shift and to get out of there. They were all very nervous as they looked at me with glowing anticipation. I slowly rolled the die, and I rolled it behind my DM screen, which I'm really not sure why I was using since I was so open with my players for that campaign. And I let them know that I rolled a 13. He had survived being thrown into the sun. The rest of that campaign continued to play out, but that is the story of the time my players actually threw the final boss into the sun at the halfway marker, and yet he still survived. I guess that's all for today. I hope you all enjoyed this story and stuck around for some of it. If not, just let me know something I could do different. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I hope you all have a good day. Until next time, roll well.